We're live. Once I put it down. Hi, great morning, everybody. Welcome back to Chai Together. I am your host and founder, Pratibha Day. You are tuning in for your cup of courage, hope, and imagination. So, on this platform, we use courage to showcase our stories, we use hope to overcome, and we use imagination to resonate and understand with the stories that are being shared. With that being said, today we are doing part two for Miss Madison Menjivar's session. And today is going to be trigger warning content. And it's going to be content that can make others uncomfortable. So if you don't want to hear regarding sexual assault and eating disorders, etc., please don't watch this morning's show at this time, or come back and replay it another time, or share it with someone who this can help. But I just want to give a trigger warning, and Madison as well wants to give a trigger warning. So how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good this morning. I'm excited to be back here again for part two, like we talked about. And I'm excited to share a bit more of my story as well as my journey. So yeah, how are you this morning?
I feel better. I'm talking to you.
Good. I'm
So
glad you
I
feel
feel
better.
better. And your mom is here with us.
She is. Hi, Mom.
Your mom is here. Hi, Menser. Great morning to you. And yes, I look forward to you sharing this. And I just want to share with everyone that since we last spoke just a few days ago, you started your own Facebook group, book club, and the title may change, as you said, but I want people to know that it's called the Mental Health Awareness Book Club. So if you type that into Facebook, it will come up and you can join Madison's book club. And tell us more about that real briefly. I know the first book is
Sure.
starting.
Yeah, so I wanted to do a book club that is based around mental illness and mental health. I feel like it's something that isn't talked about enough. And a lot of people tend to kind of stray away from like self-help books or like mental illness books because a lot of people just aren't comfortable with it. So I'm trying to kind of destigmatize, mental illnesses and kind of bring in some educational outlooks as well as hearing other people's journeys and their success stories, not just within the group, but the books that we're reading as well. And the first book that we're going to be reading is called You'll Come Back to Yourself. And it's a poetry style book that talks about this particular person's journey through life battling with like mental illness, battling with infidelity, with all different kinds of stuff. So I'm really excited about it. We have, I think, 44 members so far, and I just started it like 2 or 3 days ago. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm hoping that more people decide to join it because I think it's going to be beneficial, not just for people who have a diagnosis, but also for family members who have, or who know somebody within the family or within their friend group or workplace who maybe struggles, and it can help offer a better understanding and different perspectives on mental illness, which I think is really important for people to better understand it.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's kind of the book club right now. I'm going to try to come up with like a bit more of a creative name. I really just wanted to get it going so that people can start joining. And I posted to a couple different support groups that I'm a part of. And, a lot of people were interested, 44 already, which is exciting. So I'm hoping that people choose to like really participate, converse with each other about the book and about their feelings around it. And I plan on posting like discussion questions throughout the reading so that we can kind of take a break from it, and just discuss what we've read so far, see if it kind of brought up anything for anyone. So I feel like I'm taking like a therapeutic approach to the book club, but it's really going to be dependent on how involved the members want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I was speaking before we went live regarding people value what they pay for. So if you even make it a membership, club, that people will, benefit from it more because they provide their time to it and they value it because they've paid for it. So that's just an idea that I have as well.
Oh,
And
it's
I
a good
like that.
idea.
Yes, because they may engage because they know they've invested income in it. But I wanted to say to you that I like the idea of pausing to discuss it because as my mentor Les Brown said, that when we're in the picture frame, we can't see. Like we can't see unless we step away. And that goes for even when you're in a store, you have to step away when you're looking for something to see the bigger picture. So I like that, and I like that you can discuss it and see what comes up for people. But I feel like it's such a thin line, and I just want to share with you that to make sure you put to protect yourself any disclaimers and things, that if things come up, people should seek their therapist, etc. And that's the field you're going into. So I think it's great for experience, even if not clinical yet, to know how
Yeah.
people respond. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not trying to be the group's therapist.
Yeah.
But I understand that because it is a mental health awareness club and we're reading books regarding mental health and mental illnesses, that some things might come up.
Mm-hmm.
And I want it to be a safe space where people feel comfortable talking about things. But I also want to make sure, that I'm obviously going to be monitoring the group, monitoring discussions to make sure that everyone is being respectful of each other's opinions, their views, because I know everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going to have different views. It's just part of us being human.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want, anything to kind of turn south and me have to like ban people from the group because they were, saying something inappropriate or being disrespectful to another member. It's stuff that I won't tolerate, especially in a community where we're trying to make it as safe and I guess as freeing of a space as it can be without any kind of like negative energy.
I like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
groups definitely
we'll
have the rules
see.
you can assert. Yeah, but this
Yeah.
is great. It is a great start, and I want to ask you, what was that moment that led you to just go on and create it? Like, was this something you thought about before?
I have thought about starting a book club in the past just because I'm a big reader
Mm.
and I've read so many books. And this book I actually haven't read yet. I'm trying to pick books that I haven't read yet so that I'm also reading the book with everybody else. And I honestly, like, you kind of inspired me as well.
Oh,
Just
thank you.
you like going and taking action and doing, this podcast and bringing people on who come from all different walks of life and backgrounds and life experience. And I feel like it's really helpful for a lot of people who watch, your podcast. And I'm sure that out of every podcast, whoever is watching gets something out of it. And that's kind of my hope for the book club, that as we're reading these different books, that people are able to take something out of it and apply it to their life. So in a sense, my inspiration, besides being you, of course, is like my own love for reading and my own like yearning for more information about mental health, and also getting different perspectives, really trying to engage in the community and help to bring more awareness. And that's what really, really motivates me, because there's such horrible stigmas attached to mental illness. And I'm really wanting to help change that. So if I'm able to change one person's view from a certain book, then to me, that's a success. It's a success for me, and it's a success for the other person as well, for being able to really connect with the book and apply something from the book to their own life that will be helpful. So I'm really just hoping that that everybody is able to get something out of what we're reading and apply it. And, that's kind of like the big goal.
They will definitely learn something new. So that's for sure. You're bound
Yeah.
to when you're reading something, hopefully, right?
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm one of those people when I'm reading, I'll write in all of my books. Some people hate that, but I like to put little footnotes. Like if something really resonates with me, I'll highlight it. And then I'll write next to it like how it resonates with me, so that if I ever pick the book up again and I reread it, and I can look back at the notes and kind of see like, okay, this is where I was at in my journey 5 years ago, and this is where I'm at now.
I think
So
that's so great. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something that I do just to kind of check in with myself as I read all these different books as well. So, like, for example, I'm reading a book right now called Madness and Civilization, and it's the history of psychiatry and mental illness from the beginning of time, as far back as they can date it, in different cultures around the world.
Wow.
It talks like in depth about how all different cultures in different countries would handle people who have mental illnesses. And it's really fascinating because they talk about different philosophers, different psychiatrists, different psychologists, from Freud to like Nietzsche to, I can't remember who else, but it's very, very extensive and it's a very dense read, but it's educational. I'm obviously not going to put a book like that in the book club because I think it would be too dense for a lot of people, because it's a hard read. It's a really hard read. But I like reading stuff like that because it's educational, but I'm also able to find things out of it that I can then apply to my life, or I can use to help somebody that I know, who's maybe going through something. So, I like to educate for myself, but also with the intent to help others, because it's my goal, wanting to work in social work. So, yeah.
Thanks for touching on that. Yes, you are going to be a clinical therapist, correct? So
One day I will get there.
You could put a date this time or before,
Yeah.
You've yet to begin school, right?
I'm sorry?
You have yet to begin school, right?
I've started school. I've been in and out due to my own mental illness. School's really challenging for me because I have a lot of issues with focusing and concentration, and I get very easily overwhelmed. And the past 2 years have been really hard because all of the medications that I was on, like nothing was working. I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. And, I was in and out of treatment in the hospital. I just have not been stable enough to even think about school. But
Someone said, I love you, Pratima. That's why I laughed.
We love
Hi,
you.
who are you? I love you as well, but who is this, please? Yeah.
So, yeah, school's been a challenge, and it might take me 10 more years to finish, but I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to keep going and pushing forward. And if it takes me 10 more years, it's okay. I'll still be young in 10 years.
You will be. And I was in your position as well. I didn't think I would finish. I was in, my last year of it. And I was just like, I was going through so many things and my own mental health. Like I was not even where I had overcome things. I was really in suffering and I was pushing through. And for someone to even get good grades and be in that condition, it's hard. But I was on and off too. Like I withdrew, and then after a year after being in Thailand, then I went back last year and I got my degree. So honestly, it's, people say, oh, you're behind. People may comment things, but I always said, no, I'm not behind. I'm right where I need to be. So it's like to clarify that for people, because they have these expectations, especially in, South Asian cultures or other cultures. And it's like, no, like there is no timeline. Oh, at early 20s, you should be done. Like that's not realistic for people who live in suffering and have other concerns. It's not a perfect life. You know what I mean? Especially people who have
Yeah.
kids and stuff and they go back to school. Like if you have it all together, you have someone like taking care of everything for you, then that's realistic. Otherwise it's not. So
Yeah, like
mhm.
I have to shout out to my mom real quick. So this year my mom graduated from nursing school, and
Yay.
she is 60 years old,
Wow.
and she just graduated. So
Wow.
my mom inspires me a lot, and she was at it for like 6, 7 years trying to get, her nursing degree, and she did it, and she struggled, she cried, she got pissed off, she wanted to quit, but she
Mhm.
didn't. She stuck with it. And
Mhm.
I am so incredibly proud, excuse me, of my mom and what she has accomplished. And it gives me hope,
Mhm.
and it also inspires me. And, her doing it is saying like a big, oh, there you go. My mom said 9 years. 9 years she was at it. Um, oh, I just lost my train
Her
of thought.
doing it.
Yeah, she did it. She
Mhm.
did it, and it shows me that, I'm not too old to go back to school. Even if I might be the oldest person in the class, I'm
Mhm.
not too old. And you're never too old, you're never too young to educate yourself and to learn more. And my mom did it. So I mean, kudos to my mother, for being a big, and for accomplishing her dreams,
Mhm.
at 60 years old. I give her a ton of credit. Round of applause for my mother.
I've always been a super senior in life. Like, with school,
Yeah.
like I've been there like, and I was 24 at the time, but they thought like I was like way younger. And to be 24 and to be in the like level that I was in, like people didn't know, they thought I was younger like them, like 19, 20 or something, And it's like, no, I was not, I was always like the oldest in class, like older one in class in my 20s, So this is great. It's inspirational. It's like making me more uplifted and like wake up more.
Oh, that's
So
good.
I like that. So I know you wanted to come back and touch on the topics that are, have trigger warning for today. So anyone who's listening, once again, now we're going to dig into Madison's story and part 2 of what she wants to share. So if you're not comfortable listening to trigger warning content regarding sexual assault, etc., you can come replay this if you would like at another time, or share with someone that it can help. Yes, thank you. So
Thank you for doing the trigger warning. Um, I kind of touched on, the part of my story where I was self-harming, where I developed an eating disorder. And a lot of that, that stuff stemmed from being bullied in school for so long. And I know that we talked about, being bullied and how it really affects people long term. And it was something that really, really affected me. And the abuse that I went through affected me as well. A majority of it was verbal abuse. And for me, verbal abuse was worse than the physical abuse, because words cut really deep. And, so I was kind of, I was getting verbally abused at home. And then I was going to school and I was getting picked on there by other girls. And a lot of that really affected my self-esteem and my self-image, how I viewed myself. And we touched a bit on like these negative core beliefs that we all have because of the traumas that we go through and what we're told throughout life. And I don't know if I shared it on screen or behind the scenes, but one of my negative core beliefs that I discovered in therapy is that I'm worthless. Just this belief that I have no value because of the way that I was treated as a kid, as well as, going into like preteen and teenage years. So it's one of the reasons why, at 10, I started like kind of hitting myself or like punching my legs. Whenever I'd get in trouble, I would do something wrong. And I would start telling myself what I was told, I'm worthless. Nobody loves me. No one's ever going to love me. I'm not going to get anywhere in life. There were times where I would get compared to my siblings, and I would be told I'm not going to amount to anything, or that I'm going to end up just like one of my brothers who also struggles with bipolar disorder and addiction, end up homeless, end up a prostitute. Like, I've been told some pretty horrible things. But I also want to mention that regarding my parents, that we have a very good relationship now, and that we have out the past through everything. And I'm very close with my parents now, and they're wonderful people. So I just want to throw that out there, that they are wonderful. They've worked through things, and I'm very close with them now. But referring, to the past, I did go through a lot of things that really affected me. So one of my coping mechanisms was self-harming. So at 10, I started kind of hitting myself. Around 12, I think that's around 7th grade, is when I started cutting. And I struggled with cutting for about 10 years. And it was on and off from like 12 to 22. And I hit it really, really well, and I remember one of my brothers coming up to me and being like, why are you doing that? Like, what's wrong with you? Instead of like saying, hey, like how, like what's going on? Like, how can I help you? Instead, I was met with kind of like like it's a fucked up thing to do. Why are you doing that? Kind of thing. It was very judgy. That was from one of my siblings. And then, when my parents found out, they put me in therapy for a little bit. And then the therapist, if I'm remembering correctly, he moved. And then that was just kind of it. So I fell right back into the pattern because the trauma was still happening. It was still going on, and I didn't learn any ways to cope with it. So on top of the cutting, I developed disordered eating, and I was a kind of a mix of like bulimia and anorexia. And I would eat very little. I would take, like 10 or 12 laxatives at a time. And just like, it wasn't good. And I hid that really well too. And somehow nobody really noticed. And not to, like put any kind of blame on anyone or make anybody feel bad for not noticing. It was just the fact. It was the fact that no one really picked up on it. And I do think it was also because of the times. It wasn't really something that was talked about either. And I grew up in a family where we didn't really talk about things, because that's how my parents were raised by their parents to kind of sweep things under the rug and move on. So that's kind of what I grew up around. It made it challenging to want to seek help for it at a younger age, and I kind of ended up going through all this stuff myself. And before my husband, I had a girlfriend who I was with for 4 years, and her and I had very similar struggles for similar reasons. And I remember her telling me at one point, like, if you don't get help, like, you're gonna die. Like, that's just the fact. Like, you are literally slowly killing yourself. And nobody really said that to me before, because I hid it so well. But she was like, you're gonna die. Like, you need to do something about this. So I didn't seek help because I didn't want to admit that I had a problem, but I heard what she was saying. I heard her concern. And I was like, okay, well, I need to figure out a healthy way on my own that I can start to recover from this eating disorder, from this self-loathing, this self-hatred that I had from not just the abuse, but the bullying in school as well. And I started to get on a healthier path by working out. I was working with a trainer at a local gym, and I filled him in like, I'm struggling with an eating disorder. I want to like feel better about myself. And like, I know you're not a therapist and like you can't like fix me, but if I feel better about the way that I look, then maybe I can kind of start the healing journey on my own. And that's what I ended up doing. And I've been recovered from my eating disorder for 5 years now. So, I've been on that journey for a long time. And then, I feel like I still have issues that come up here and there, like around the eating disorder. And I think a lot of that also stems from trigger warning from my sexual assault that happened when I was 18 years old. I was raped, and that really affected my self-esteem and my self-worth. And it also started to kind of feed into the eating disorder more, because then instead of thinking, I'm beautiful, I feel better about myself, it went from starting to feel better to that happening and me being like, I don't want to be attractive. I don't want people to approach me. I don't want to, like, I didn't want to work out anymore. I didn't want to like do anything that was going to make me more appealing because of that. So it was like a really big step back for me. Like I felt like I was finally taking 2 or 3 steps forward, with working out and bettering myself. And then that happened, and it really just, it was like, running right into a wall and just falling and feeling like you're falling and falling and falling. And it's just like this endless drop until I just kind of hit my rock bottom. And I started self-harming again. I started, really, I guess, just hating myself because of what I went through. But the point that I'm at now, it's something that I can look back on and it still hurts. Like I remember, I think it was last year, my husband and I started watching Game of Thrones, and I already knew ahead of time that there were some pretty brutal like rape scenes in it. And
Wow.
I didn't know, obviously, like when those scenes were going to come up. But I think the first one was around like season 2. And I remember watching it with my husband. And as soon as this, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't watch this. I started like hyperventilating. And I was like, okay, like this is something that I probably still need to work on. But I'm at the point where like I'm able to talk about it and I'm able to, share my story about what happened. But obviously, like watching something like that is still going to be triggering. So it was a lot. It was a lot just to watch it. Well, I didn't watch it. I turned it off, and I still haven't gone back to it.
There's no need to. I mean,
It's
why would
too
anyone
much.
want to watch anything? I don't watch horror movies and things that are disturbing to my peace and violent. Like, why would someone want to watch? You know what I mean? It's like, why would you want
Yeah,
to affect your mental health poorly by watching someone be raped in a scene? Like, I feel that's why they say to be careful what you listen to, what you watch, and all those things affects your mental health. So
it
I don't watch
does.
that show. It's not my style of show. but I wouldn't want to watch anything like that. That's very uncomfortable and disturbing. And we were talking about dreams before the live, and it can show up in your subconscious. Like, that's one of the reasons why I
Yeah.
don't watch that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was I haven't been able to go back to it. I had a lot of friends who were like, Game of Thrones, it's a great show, it's really good, but beware, there's like 2 really bad scenes, but besides those 2 bad scenes, the show is actually really good. Up until that episode, I really liked the show. I liked the story. I kind of like those themed shows, like
Yeah.
well, not shows but
Maybe
movies
they
like
can
Lord of
tell
the
you.
Rings. And
Maybe they can tell you when it is, and you could skip. Oh, that could have been avoided, possibly, but
yeah.
now it's already done. But it just makes me question. It's like it makes me question the directors. Like, what was that necessary? Is that like what's the purpose of that? Unless it's shining light on not to do that. Like, I don't ethically agree with the fact of having showing rapes and things in movie. Like, you know what I mean? It's not a positive thing. It's not a good thing. Like, to show that for
No,
anyone's
it's
mental
not.
health.
It's
It
not a
shows
good
people
thing.
like it may show someone that's okay to do that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do know that the producers and whatnot, they got a lot of shit for
Wow.
putting those scenes in the show. So
Mm-mm.
I know there was a lot of backlash because of it, and that they were too graphic, and,
Oh,
and that's one
wow.
of the reasons why I couldn't do it. And it was very triggering for me, and I obviously still am working through my journey as far as the sexual assault goes.
Mhm.
Um, but I've been able to do it in a healthy way because I've
Mhm.
been going to therapy and been going to treatment, and I've been able to start working through it, to like open that door and kind of like let a little bit out at a time so that I'm
Mhm.
not just flooded.
Mhm.
Um, and it's been helpful to be able, to be on a podcast like this, where it's a safe space to talk about this kind of stuff, because most people don't want to talk about it,
Mm.
because it's hard, it's uncomfortable
Mhm.
for a lot of people. Um, even if someone hasn't experienced it, it's just like, ooh, like I don't want to talk about that.
Mhm.
But it needs to be talked about, just like mental illness needs to be talked about, just like self-harming needs to be talked about, and eating disorders need to be talked about. Like, all of these things need to be talked about, or we're not going to be moving forward in the mental health world, and we're already so far behind. you know um,
Mhm.
if America would have focused more on mental illness, like when we started getting into wars and these vets were having experiences, PTSD, to like people being oppressed and discriminated against, stuff affects people long term, but nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to
Mhm.
talk about the mental health effects that our history has. And if
Mm.
we would have started earlier, we would be so much further ahead than we are now. And
Mhm.
I just personally feel like we're really behind.
Yes, there's a lot of gaps. I know from experience regarding my mom, and how protocols were taking place, etc. And even someone who works in mental health, a social worker, he had shared with me that there are a lot of concerns, and like they can only do what they can do, but it's not up to one person. It's like everyone needs to come together. And honestly, it's like it's beyond me. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's a whole movement that needs to take place. Yeah.
Yeah. It's beyond both of us, and anybody that is watching, it's beyond us, but there's power in numbers,
Mhm.
so the more that we spread awareness and educate people, the more people are going to be like, wow, like we need to do something about this. Like,
Mhm.
we need to help these people, because it's not like it's 100 people who struggle with mental illness in America, or globally, it's millions of people, yet it's like it's ignored. I don't understand it. It's like, even just looking at how suicide rates have skyrocketed during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
If we did more to bring awareness to mental health, and we had more resources for people, and we were able to make it more affordable for everybody, then it's not that we wouldn't have these issues, but the rates would be lower.
Mm-hmm.
We would be able to do more to help.
Children,
So
especially. Yeah. I know
yes,
children who have committed suicide. Mm-hmm.
yeah, children, teenagers, a lot of the younger, um, the younger people, they're growing up in a different world than even you and I grew up in because of technology. Like, cyberbullying is blowing up. Bullying in schools still happens, and no one really does anything about it. Like I shared in the last podcast, how the girls would corner me in the bathroom and they would like yell at me. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember one girl like telling me that like I was anorexic, and I didn't even know what that was at the time. And I remember going home and looking it up,
Mm.
and it was pretty much like the way that she said it. She was just insulting my body, and insulting how I looked, by attaching it to a disorder, which at that time it was like 5th grade. I don't even think she probably knew much about it either. But ironically, I ended up developing an eating disorder from not just the traumas that I went through, but a lot of it stemmed from the bullying. And it's just like they do like bullying prevention, things
Mm.
in schools, but like no one even mention, nobody even listens, because it's just like, here's how bullying affects people, and it's very surface stuff. And I think that people would resonate at those assemblies more if they brought in people who have been bullied, who are older,
Mm-hmm.
older people who have been bullied, and how it's affected their life long term.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't feel like kids or teens really grasp the long-term effects of their behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's understandable as well, because their brains aren't fully developed. They're still learning, they're still growing, but that doesn't mean that the seed can't be planted.
Mm-hmm.
And if the seed is at least planted, maybe they would be more self-aware of how their behavior might affect somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I've even
I
thought
agree with
about
them.
like volunteering at schools for assemblies to
Yes.
like talk about it. Like, hey, I was bullied for years and this is how it affected me.
Mm-hmm.
But doing it in a way where obviously I would have to be a lot more cautious with wording and,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of content that I would share. But that kind of stuff isn't talked about in those assemblies. At least it wasn't when we were in school.
No. No one
No.
paid attention. I just remember it was a tiger for dare, like it was a lion with the shirt.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like the graphics stood out more than I don't remember anything else. Like, it just said like don't do drugs. I don't know. Everyone did drugs. Come on. Like, almost. You know what I mean? Everyone smoked weed here almost. So
Yeah. I think I was one of the only people, and well, there was me and one of my best friends. Like, we never did stuff like that. I had friends who like, smoked weed, or they would try like Molly, stuff like
oh
that.
no. I never went
But
past weed.
me either. Me
Yeah.
either. I mean, I smoke weed. I'm in California. It's legal out here. I use it medically to treat my insomnia, and it helps
Nice.
really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
But before I moved out here, I would never try anything. One, because I was told by my father in the past
Mm-hmm.
that I would, end up like my brother, who is a heroin addict and has been in and out of prison. So I always kind of had this like seed planted in my head that I would kind of end up just like my brother. But I always wanted to like fight against that, you know. But also because he chose to self medicate with heroin, that I didn't want to touch any kind of drug because I wanted to fight against what I was told as a child how I would end up. So I never touched anything. I was terrified. You know, I was always told that, you know, pot is a gateway drug to all this other stuff. And here I am smoking pot for 5 years, treating stuff that I medically have. And I still haven't done anything else besides,
I'm
you know,
glad.
weed. And
I'm
I
glad.
never will. I never will. You know, I do think that weed is medicinal. It's a plant. You know, it's a plant, just like shrooms are a mushroom, you know, and now they're trying to do studies for microdosing, you know, shrooms and is it MDMA? I think they were microdosing. I might be wrong on that one. I'll have to fact check it. But I do know that there are some research centers who are trying to get clinical trials set up to treat bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and post-traumatic stress disorder with microdosing.
Wow.
And if we would have done this 60 years ago, we could have already been so much more advanced, even medically. But that's obviously not going to happen because the pharmaceutical companies make so much money off of these drugs.
Say
You
it,
know?
girl.
It's
Especially
the truth.
for low income. Yeah, the statistics is low income children age of 15 for bipolar schizophrenia are the most to use those pharmaceutical drugs. And in low income, it's like no one really advocates for low income people. They care less if they died or etc. That's just the truth. I forget where I had learned this, but it was through a podcast, educational podcast, and that's what was said, and that's the truth, you know, regarding
Yeah.
low income and the children taking all those meds and get them hooked on it, and that's it.
Yeah, it's horrible. Like, we don't do enough in this country to support people, you know, are in lower income brackets or they live in poverty. It's the distribution of wealth in this country is not right, and we don't do enough. We just don't, and it's tragic. It really is. Things need to change, and I'm hoping that America progresses instead of moving backwards, because right now I'm not too sure which way America is going to go. But you know, you're absolutely right. The lower income people who live in lower income families, they're just kind of ignored by our government. They're not really able to get assistance that they need, medications that they need. I remember watching a documentary on the pharmaceutical companies, and there was a story of a woman who had some sort of disease or like genetic issue, and she had to take a medication in order to stay alive. Without this medication, she would die. Like, she would not be alive. The medication cost them $300,000 a year, and they had to refinance their house 5 different times in order to pay for this medication for her to be alive. Like, that shouldn't happen. Like, $300,000. That's a house. Like,
You seen the movie on Netflix, Sweet Girl,
no.
with Jason Momoa? That's regarding the pharmaceutical. If you've seen the trailer,
Okay.
it shows you this is not me telling you the movie. In the trailer, it shows you that his wife dies because the pharmaceutical industry took the medicine off that she needed to survive. And yeah, that's what talked about. But that's a good movie. That's not even the story of it. That's just the trailer part. But let me tell you, I find that to be inhumane. Like, you know what I mean? We're supposed to help one another live a great life, but honestly, the facts are that not everyone's going to have a great life, live a great life, live till they're old. It's like, and this is just the truth, like, they don't want us to. They, as in maybe government, whoever, I don't know who's responsible, but it's like the population would get so high and overwhelming. That's why all these pandemics, etc., from my just own perspective, takes place in regarding cancer, etc. If you could find, I don't know what the update is. It's like if we could go to the moon and we could have a vaccine for this pandemic, you have a cure for cancer, yes or no? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure there is. Let's say if it was for a celebrity, like they would find it, yes or no, like with the money they have, like, you know what I mean? But that's just, I don't know the truth, but that's just what comes to mind. It's like, if we could do all this, right, a vaccine for
Yeah.
pandemic but no vaccine for all the other things going on, all
No,
these,
I
you know what I
I
mean?
agree with you completely.
It
Yeah,
doesn't make
I
sense.
agree.
It's
I
just
mean,
not logical.
it's not logical. And like, I feel like I've been saying for like the last 10 years of my life, like, I swear they have a cure for cancer, but they
Yeah,
only give it to people who can afford it.
yeah.
And that's like the top
I've
1%.
heard that. I've heard that, definitely. Let's say if Jeff Bezos were to get it today. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just
I
an
mean,
example. I don't know.
if we can figure out how to travel to space and
Mhm.
explore space and build things,
That's what
create
I'm saying. It
robotics,
doesn't it's to keep the population at bay. Like,
it must be.
that's just my own
It must
understanding
be.
after all these years. I remember, I don't know where this came from, but I don't know, but I was young, but I remember as a child being told that, oh, in America, there'd be a time where cars would fly. I don't know if I was told that as a child, but I really believed throughout my family members, like, we really believed that, like, oh, like there would come a time where like there'd be flying cars. Did you ever hear of that? Or was that just
Yes.
you being told? You heard that too,
No, I've
right?
heard that too.
In
Yeah.
like in the future, like, oh, the technology is gonna be so great, we're gonna have flying cars. I was like waiting to see flying cars like all throughout childhood.
Yeah, I was too. And now I'm like, well, if you can make a car that flies, then where's the cure for cancer? Where's the cure for all of these different diseases? Like, I was talking with my dad a few days ago, and we were talking about, all of the different diseases and disorders that are out there. And they're working on like gene splicing and doing all different kinds of things. And it's like, if they can go into your DNA and change your actual genetics, why can't they cure cancer?
Hmm.
Like, that
Yeah, I
doesn't
think it's BS. I think it's total BS. But
it doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
no, it doesn't. That's why it's like I'm a practical person. So, but I
A
do want to
realist.
ask you, going back to, if I may, going back to your sexual assault, the person who conducted that act, it's like, did you ever press any charges, or what happened with that situation?
No, I didn't press charges. It was one of those situations where I was like dating online and I met with somebody and it
Mhm.
just turned really bad. And the person was living in a halfway house or a recovery home.
Mm,
And I obviously wasn't aware of that, but my mistake was choosing to go home with him. I made that choice, but I didn't make the choice to have sex with him.
mhm.
That wasn't
But you
my
didn't know
choice.
any better. I mean, how old were you at this time?
I was 18. I was
Yeah.
young. I was naive.
Mhm.
I went through, a lot of bad experiences in my life, and I was very insecure. I pretty much hated myself and didn't really care what happened.
Mhm.
Um, so I ended up getting into a really, bad situation. And I remember that night I just drove home and acted like nothing ever happened. And I just never dealt with it. And maybe 5 years ago, when or probably 4 years ago, when I was seeing one of my old therapists, I was telling her about what happened, and she was like, Madison, that's rape. And I was like, no, it's not. Like, I chose to go home with him. I chose to do that. Like, but she was like, but you didn't choose to have sex with him. That was something that was forced on you. And she said, that is rape. And it never really clicked in my head. I just played the blame game because I was young and naive. If I made a different decision, this wouldn't have happened. If I didn't dress the way I did, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
All
but
of
it's
these
not your fault,
little things, that we're told as women, we're blamed for rape happening to us when it should be the other person who is blamed. Like, it was their decision to do that, but I don't even know if the name he told me was real. I don't I didn't remember where he lived. I didn't remember the name of the recovery home. So there really wasn't any way that I could even really press charges. And
it was the first meetup.
yeah, it was the first one. And again, I feel like I still have work to do around it. I still have, some self-blame things that I need to work through, because it's a hard thing to go through, and it's a hard thing to work through, especially when I do feel like some of it was my fault because I made certain decisions. But at the end of the day, the actual actions were the other person's and not mine by choice. And that's where I have to remind myself, like, Madison, you can't blame yourself for what happened, but you can learn from the experience and learn to make, wiser choices, and to be more cautious and safe, and try to, get better at reading people so I can really understand and pick up on little cues that most people would miss. Because those little cues can be red flags. And red flags to me are like, nope, not going there. And I'll have friends that talk to me about certain things or certain traumas they've gone through. And I don't know, they might be with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and something might come up, and I'm like, that's a red flag. Like, they're gaslighting you. Do you know what gaslighting is? Most people don't know what it is. So then I'm like, okay, well, this is what it is. Or my favorite one that people say is, you made me feel this way, or you made me do it.
Wow.
No, nobody made you do anything. Your choices, your decisions, your actions are your own. Your emotions are your own. Nobody else can make you feel a certain way. It's all in how you choose to react to it. So I know a lot of people play the blame game. It's your fault. You made me do this. People will deflect, saying I don't like you, you're mean, you're this, you're that. But that might actually be how they're feeling about themselves. They'll deflect it onto somebody else. There's all different kinds of really unhealthy defense mechanisms people use. And that's something else that I'm trying to be more aware of, and also trying to educate people on, because it's all stuff that I've learned in treatment over the years. And the "you made me" one is the one that really stuck out to me, because after I was raped, the guy said something along the lines of stop crying, you made me do this. Because of the way that I looked or the way that I dressed, for some reason he kind of put the blame of his actions onto me. And going through therapy and talking about this kind of stuff, I started to realize wow, there were a lot of people in my life who have used, the you made me do. kind of statement, or like, you made me feel this way. It's your fault that, I'm angry right now. You made me angry. Like, no, you chose to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference there. And I know a lot of people who struggle with this and who don't even recognize
Mm-hmm.
that, saying stuff like that is an unhealthy defense mechanism. It's a way to put up your guard and not own up to your own emotions and your own actions and how they affect other people, but instead it deflects it onto the other person. It's like playing the blame game, you know? Um, so that's something I'm trying to be more self-aware about, like in my own
Mm-hmm.
life, but also like helping my friends to recognize things that are unhealthy as well. And that's also something that I'm hoping, um, we can read about in the book club, like
Mm-hmm.
different books on different coping skills, how to develop healthier, coping mechanisms, straying away from the unhealthy defense mechanisms, as well as like learning more about negative core beliefs and all of that stuff that really kind of shapes who we are and how we think about ourselves. Like, it can change, because I went from, I hate myself to I like myself. And we talked about that a bit on part
Mm-hmm.
one, and it's wonderful to see like how people can go through so much in life, but they can still sit here and say like, I like who I am. So like,
Mm-hmm.
my favorite saying is, you be you, you know?
Oh,
So
I like
it's,
that. Would you get that tattooed?
I'm sorry,
Would you get that tattooed?
where would I?
You be you.
I
Yeah.
would, I would probably get that tattooed somewhere.
There's a book I want to recommend that helped me last year. It's called Forgiveness. So I have it on Audible, but it's an old book. I think before
Okay.
time. It's called Forgiveness. It has a green and purple cover, and one of the authors is Sandy because it's a co-collaboration. But it's really good because it gives you actual activities in each part to work through. You have the victim stage, of the survivor stage, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like where are you? So that's
Yeah.
a good book that helped me. There's other books, like I'll share, an email with you the stuff, but it's so great that you're doing this work now because there's people, like I think I said this before, like who be living in suffering by just, being at a standstill and just saying, well, this is just how the way things are and the way things been, and you're just going to die that way. You know what I mean? Like, this is
Yeah.
where the real growth comes, is doing the hard work and knowing that, hey, I'm going to be on the other side of it one day. And that's how I took, charge of my life, and you're doing the same thing. So, yeah. Yeah.
We're strong women.
Mhm. And
Like I was
obviously,
saying,
yeah. Go ahead. Mhm.
like I was saying on the last podcast, like, if anyone out there is struggling, like, you just got to keep waking up,
Mhm.
and just
That's
keep
it.
going. Just
Yeah.
keep going, because I mean, it's hard, it's a battle, it's not easy by any
Mhm.
means, but you and I are at a point where we're like, all right, we went through all of this horrible shit in our lives. Now, how can we help other people
Yes.
who have gone through similar things? How can we help educate people
Yeah.
about trauma, about mindfulness, about defense mechanisms, about negative core beliefs? Like, how can we bring all of these uncomfortable topics to the surface, but then also create the safe space for people to feel comfortable talking about it? And that's one
Mhm.
of the reasons why I admire what you're doing, because you're creating that safe space for people like me to come on and talk about our stories, and it's safe. It is a safe space. And even though the story is out there, it's on the internet now, it's around, it's the world, the internet world is endless,
Mhm.
but you've created a space that is comfortable and inviting,
Mm.
and even like your whole aura, this whole thing about you, like you're comfortable to talk to. Like you're just a wonderful person, and I admire you for what you're doing. No, I really do. And I think that you're doing really wonderful work that I'm sure is helping a lot of people, and it's helping the mental health community because you're bringing awareness to all of these uncomfortable things that people don't want to talk about. So, and I have to commend you for that. Like it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And wow. Yeah. That I do get that, I'm able to resonate with other people. Because I've been through like all of it too. So that's why I think I may have shared with you, maybe not online, but that, yeah, I had a pastor tell me one time most people will commit suicide experiencing all the things I've experienced. And the fact that I'm on the other side of it's because so I can relate to all the other people, and
Yeah.
doing something with it. I like that. Yeah.
Resilience,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
the drive to just keep going, to hope, holding on to hope,
Hmm.
you know, that things can get better. It
Hmm.
just takes a lot of work, and people have to be willing to put in the work that they need to do in order to get better and to feel, you know, more fulfilled and feel actual like real happiness,
Hmm.
you know. For me it's like looking in the mirror every day and I'm like, I look good today, you know. Like just
Yes.
doing like little things like that can
Hmm.
really help, because then you're changing
Hmm.
your beliefs that you've been told your whole life. You're fighting against it by waking up every day and saying, I look good today, or like I
Hmm.
like myself, or I don't I don't know, just any kind of like little compliments that you can give
Hmm.
yourself every single day, even if it's just one compliment a day. Eventually, over time, as you continue to do it, your negative core beliefs, you know, are going to change. You're because you're putting in the work every day to say something positive about yourself, and that can make a big difference over time. You know, and writing out, for me, I like doing gratitude journal entries
Hmm.
where I might pick one thing that happened today that I was really grateful for. And it could have been a random person on the street smiling at me and saying hello. You know,
Hmm.
something as simple as that can make my day, because it's somebody else showing kindness.
Hmm.
And that's something that we don't see a lot anymore, you know. So I like to write and focus on like the good little moments that happen, because we're surrounded by so much bad every
Hmm.
single day that it kind of makes us all depressed,
Hmm.
you know. Like even if people don't have an official diagnosis or have a diagnosis, like just living in the world that we live in today is pretty depressing because of everything that is happening. And people focus so much on it that I don't think they're aware of how it really affects them mentally.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why every day I like to focus on something positive, just because there is so much bad. You know, it's
Yeah.
important
Bitter
to remember
people.
what's really important.
Yeah, when people are bitter, like you say hello, they don't say hello back, or maybe they're going through something. But yeah, there's people. It's like I feel like when you're in that vibration of positivity, you attract the same. Hopefully, there may be occurrences that you can't control where you may come across someone, but I feel like that's to test you how you're going to respond to that. Are you going to also freak out? Or are you going to be calm and say, well, I wish you all the best, and then like go about your day? It's kind of like
Yeah.
to test you and see how far you've come mentally to cope with that. And I feel like today's conversation, I feel like, that this was the time to have it, that you needed this, you know what I mean? Possibly that you wanted to share this, you needed that platform, and that I was able to provide that for you. You know what I mean? Like there's a
Yeah.
timing. If we were to wait too long, maybe it wouldn't have been the same vibration, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I've been talking about, um, for a while now, at least in therapy and in treatment, and with one of my best friends out here. But it was never something that I really felt comfortable, like openly talking about with strangers. But I've gotten to the point where, I mean, when I'm in treatment centers, I'm with people who I don't know. So I've kind of gotten used to sharing my story, because then we would get a new person who would come in and they wouldn't know anything that's going on. And I'm like, all right, well, I need to talk about this again, so this new person can be filled in, and then I can also refresh everyone else's mind in the room. So by kind of not being forced, but being encouraged to retell your story, it does help. And it's gotten me to the point now where I'm like, I can talk about this. I can talk about it. And sure, I still get knots in my stomach when I talk about it, because it was a horrible experience. But I'm also at the point where I've shared it so many times in treatment that I'm comfortable talking about it, and I'm comfortable being open about it. And I don't know if our stories can help other people, but if they can, I want to put it out there. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it today, that you can go through really horrible things like you and I have gone through, and we can make it to the other side. It's just a journey. Oh, it's a long, hard journey, but it pays off and it's worth it.
It is. Do you feel like you're reframing your story? Because I know my therapist brought up that to be careful who you speak with about and how often, because it can actually be worse for you to speak about it so much when it's, with details and all. Not that, you share details of, the assault, but that can be unhealthy as well. And then do you feel like, I don't always speak about my abortion as in detail wise. I've been on 1 or 2 podcasts, but I'm like, that's enough for me, because it's not healthy for me to keep talking about that and reliving it. So do you feel like you're reliving it, or you're reframing it from a place of love and healing? Because that's something to check in on, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've worked through a majority of it, and I have learned that by sharing my story, I'm not obvious. I didn't go into detail, and I didn't exactly want to go into detail. That's where I set my boundary when I talk about it. I'm comfortable talking about what happened and how I have grown from it. And I like to tell my story to give hope to other people that you can make it through, and you can find happiness and forgiveness and not let the trauma control your life. So I feel like for me, it's coming from a healthy place, because it's something that I want to talk about in hopes that it helps other people, if that makes sense.
Good. Yes.
So, but I tend to avoid going into detail, because I've set boundaries with myself on how much, I should share and how much I'm comfortable sharing, and I'm obviously comfortable talking about the assault, but I'm not very comfortable going into details, in a podcast setting, because it's very, very personal.
And I feel like that's for a therapist to unpack with a treatment plan. That's not for. And one thing I wanted to say was, definitely takes courage once again, as I always tell you, but I forget the actor's name. He recently passed, Greg Marson. I may be wrong, but he was in Sex and the City, too. He's the bald man. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
I never watched the show.
Really? Okay. Well, that's where I remember him from. But recently, I just saw a post this morning where he passed, and at the end of the post, Kristen Davis, I believe her name is. She's one of the girls from the show, the actress, and she said at the end, she said, we never got to have our next time to do the podcast. Something like that. Like they were going to do a podcast in her caption, but that they waited on it, that they never got to do their podcast together. And that made me think yep, I'm showing up today. You know what I mean? Not to take time for myself, but the fact that we don't know if there'll be a next time. If you can show up, you show up. You know what I mean? In that sense. So when I
Yeah.
saw that, I was just like, but then at the same time, there's always going to be so many next times, like, let's plan this, plan this. It's like, you may need to reschedule or something, etc. And the person, let's say something may happen, they may pass on. That's out of your control. But the best you can do is show up as much as you can, I feel. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, like they never got to do what they planned to together. Like, I don't know how long it's been, but you know what I mean? It's not good seeing that. Like, oh, you think you're going to see them next time, but you don't. That's why you do
Yeah.
it this time. So that's a good reminder that, and these are people who are successful, like in regarding finances, everything. They can schedule their own stuff. You know what I mean? From
Yeah.
our understanding. So it's like the fact that they kept delaying or whatever, and that didn't do it. It's like now he's gone. So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, in most cases, it's better late than never, but in some cases, it's better to jump
Yeah.
on the opportunity.
He actually had cancer. He actually had cancer. So it's interesting. Pancreatic cancer. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Stupid
All right.
cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
sighing because cancer just affects so
Mm-hmm.
many people, and I wish that there was more that could be done to help.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather had he had cancer for 10 years, and it was the Alzheimer's, I think, that actually ended up killing him, or he passed, but he battled cancer as well. And then I had an aunt who had breast cancer, and luckily she's been in remission for 5 years. So fingers crossed, nothing comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but cancer just kind of it affects everyone and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's family. And I just wish that there was more that we could do.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
do.
I want to thank you for sharing your time and space here with us today.
Of
This
course.
was a great conversation. And yes, so everyone, they can join you at your Mental Health Awareness Book Club on Facebook and
Yes. If
your
anyone is a
Instagram.
big reader,
Mm-hmm.
big readers, I suggest you join the group, especially if you want to learn more about mental health and like self-help books and self-care, mindfulness, DBT, CBT. We're going to be focusing on all different kinds of mental health awareness topics. So if anyone is interested, please go ahead and join the group. Otherwise, I want to thank you very much for having me on the show again. Actually, so soon.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And I hope that you get the rest,
Oh, thank you.
that you need.
Thank
Take that time for yourself, spoil yourself,
you.
do
Mm-hmm.
what you got to do to like feel better,
Mm-hmm.
the way
Yeah.
that my bestie and I say, we're always
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, you got to straighten your crown,
Mm.
pick yourself up,
I
keep
like that.
going. But we always talk about straightening our crown. Like nobody is
Mm.
going to take that from us.
I love
You
that.
know?
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Until
Thank
next
you.
time.
I appreciate it.
You have a great day. Thank you for
You
those
too.
tuning in.
Yes, thank you.